The Self as God. Now, that's a pretty provocative title, right? Today, we're unpacking an analysis that uses this one single idea, what it calls a heresy, to connect two moments in history that feel like they're worlds apart. So let's dive right in.
Okay, so it sounds like the beginning of a riddle, doesn't it? What does a 19th century seminary have to do with a modern-day school? Well, the analysis we're digging into today argues that there's actually a deep, direct line connecting them, one single philosophical thread. Our job is to follow that thread and see where it leads.
All right, let's get into Section 1, A Tale of Two Crises. We're going to start with the first crisis, which takes us all the way back to a 19th century theological movement in a place called Tübingen.
So back in the 19th century, this movement, known as Tübingen modernism, was trying to do something really ambitious, bridge the gap between traditional faith and all these hot new ideas coming out of German philosophy. You can think of it like they were trying to install a major software update for theology, except the new code was coming from some, let's just say, very different programmers.
So what exactly was in this update? Well, the source points to three really key philosophical imports. First, from Kant, you get this idea that we're all kind of locked inside our own minds, that truth is something we build internally, not something we just find out there. Then, from Hegel, they brought in the idea of the church as this living, evolving organism. And finally, from the Romantics, they took this intense focus on inner feelings, basically saying that faith is much more about your personal experience than about any objective belief.
And this quote from the source just nails the final result. Revelation becomes introspection. Dogma becomes autobiography. So what does that even mean? Well, it means the whole focus just flips on its head. Truth isn't seen as coming from an external God anymore. It's bubbling up from within the community itself. Religious doctrine then starts to look less like a statement about God and a lot more like a story the community is telling about itself.
All right, let's move on to Section 2 and continue our tale of two crises. Now, we're going to fast forward to our second case file, modern education. So, this brings us to a theory you might hear about today called affective learning. And really, the name gives it all away. It's all about affect, or feelings. This approach puts the student's inner world, their emotions, their values, their personal gut reactions, right at the very center of what it means to learn.
Now, take a look at these core principles. The student's feelings are what's most important. Knowledge is something you build yourself, not something you discover out in the world. And self-expression starts to take the place of searching for objective truth. Does that sound familiar? You're starting to see the pattern here, right? It's almost the exact same playbook we just saw in theology.
And boom, here's the result in education. It's an exact echo of what the source claims happened in theology. In both cases, an external standard, whether you call it revelation or logos, that Greek idea of reason or divine order, it gets replaced by an internal one. It's all about a meaning that is generated purely by the self.
Which brings us to Section 3, the metaphysical pathogen. So, is all this just a crazy coincidence? The author we're examining says absolutely not. The claim is that both theology and education were infected by the exact same metaphysical pathogen, a single core philosophical mistake that treats the self as God.
And that pathogen has a name, the heresy of immanence. Okay, that sounds complicated, but let's break it down real quick. Transcendent just means something outside of us, beyond us, like an external God or an objective reality. Immanent means dwelling within. So the error, as it's described here, is completely flipping that around and saying that all truth and all meaning don't come from some transcendent source, but they emerge only from inside our own minds and our own experiences. The source then lays out this 5-step process that it claims is at work. So let's walk through it. Step 1 is the collapse. You're cut off from any external truth. Step 2 is the rise. Your own inner consciousness rushes in to fill that void and becomes the new authority. Step 3, the eclipse. Objective, universal truth gets totally overshadowed by your own personal interpretations. Step 4, the primacy of experience. How something feels to you becomes way more important than what it actually is. And the final step, Step 5, pride. Man puts himself on a throne as the one and only source of all truth. And this table here, wow, it just lays it all out, side by side, showing how parallel these two processes are. Let's look at the concepts on the left. First, reality gets detached. It's dogma in one case, knowledge in the other. Then, that reality is replaced by an illusion. The church's self-understanding becomes truth, or the student's self-construction becomes truth. After that, everything is based on perception.
Faith becomes just an inward feeling, while learning becomes an emotional response. And the final result? Behavior is now driven by feelings, not by facts. It is the identical operation.
So let's talk about the civilizational consequence in Section 4. What are the stakes here? I mean, why does any of this matter? Well, according to this analysis, the pathogen wasn't contained. It spread way beyond the church and the classroom, and it led to these massive, civilization-wide consequences.
The author uses this really powerful metaphor. They call it Promethean. You know, the old Greek myth, right? Where Prometheus steals fire from the gods and gives it to humans. Well, in this telling, modern man has tried to steal something even bigger, the actual power to create truth itself, making our own inner will the source of all reality.
And these, the source claims, are the direct consequences of that theft. Education, as we see here, becomes a form of therapy. Theology becomes just a study of people, not a study of God. Governance becomes all about manipulating public emotion. And the ultimate endpoint, as this image suggests, is a person who is totally isolated, trapped inside their own head, in a world where truth is just your perspective and morality is just whatever you happen to desire.
So the ultimate claim here, and it's a huge one, is that this one single philosophical shift, this heresy of immanence, is basically the fundamental blueprint for our modern world. And it doesn't matter if the person pushing it is wearing the robes of a priest, a professor, or a politician. The underlying operating system is exactly the same.
Which leaves us with the final, really provocative question posed by the source. If this analysis is right, and if we are living in a prison of the self, then where, as this slide asks, are the windows out? A challenging thought to end on.